6 is a little juicier. We've already seen the chaos scenario. This is really about the industries and how they fit together and how they work. Everybody's got to change. And we know this from media industries, that if they don't change, they get sucked up, they get passed over. They can't just stick their heels in the ground and say, I'm going to just stay the same, and they get run over. So the change is inevitable. We just don't know exactly how it's going to work, how they'll integrate into the new, how the old will change, whether it will or it won't. But the established media have to make some changes, and you can see that in the range of the degree to which either music didn't change fast enough, is television changing, how are movies changing. You can see it across all of the aspects. And then there's this issue of convergence. I don't think Garfield gets this quite right, but that's okay. You can make a mistake once in a while. We've already talked about convergence a little bit. There is this idea that maybe everything will converge into one box. I don't think anybody believes in that anymore, but there's probably enough competition among and between players that most folks think that convergence doesn't really mean everything coming into one source anymore, but rather that there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of convergence in the industries. We're going to come to it in just a second. A lot of overlap. So you've got the same information going through a lot of sources horizontally, right? Convergence that way. We'll come to it in terms of co-ownership here in just a second. So there's path crossing. The information is available in a lot of different mediums. It's the same information. But it's not convergence as we originally thought about it, which was that everything would eventually come through one box. Now, it might. Certainly, as we talked about earlier, that pipe wars are important. Who wins, who delivers it, it does make a difference. And if somebody were to win out, it would matter a lot. But we think there's enough competition among the biggest players, cable, satellite, phone, television, that probably one won't win in the long run. No guarantees there, but I don't think in your lifetime you're going to see a single provider. Hard to know for sure, but because the communication business tends toward monopoly, and that's just a historic fact. In some ways, we kind of wish that it didn't, but it just does. Not much we can do about it. We try to legislate it, but it doesn't work too well. So, generally speaking, in this country, and to a little tiny bit less degree, a smaller degree internationally, you're looking at, roughly speaking, the big 6. You can expand this to about 8 globally, and you get most of the companies. Okay, Time Warner, Disney, the News Corporation, Viacom, Bertelsmann, and Vivendi. And they control, in our country, about 80% of all the media. And I'll put this chart up on, or link to it, either one, up on Sakai so you can look at the companies. But there's another way to do it, which we'll get you a link to as well. And that's with the Columbia Journalism Review. So let's look at Bertelsmann, for example, as one of the big ones. This is Bertelsmann of Germany. This is their broadcasting group. Their publishing group. Titles, they don't. Those are companies. These are titles. And their music. These companies are huge. They're massive. Okay? And if you take the top If you go to 18, you get about 99.9% of all the content in the world. If you go to 18 companies. Okay? But even just the top 10, you get about 85 to 90% of information globally. Now, that means that, you know, convergence is sort of theoretically possible. You could get a company that controls across mediums and channels, pipes. But there are the 6 of them, so they fight with each other. Okay. But it's changed the landscape, you know, because you got news stations that are owned by the publishing company that's covering the review of the books and the magazines and the newspapers that appear in the newspapers and the magazines and on the stations that they all own. Not easy to do a critical review of the guys who own your job. It happens, but it's harder than when you're competing. Okay? So there's also a little trouble with regard to innovation, because innovation really thrives on competition. And when you really don't compete, you're really competing against other people in the company. It's different than competing against other players. So monopolies really got implications. Okay. We do a little plus and minus here. There's good and bad. It isn't all bad. And the guys in the industry will argue why they do it. A lot of them will just tell you we did it to survive. We were going down, and we had to acquire an internet company, or we would lose all that revenue. So we bought an internet company so we could survive. Or we bought another television station or another radio station, because then we can commingle all this stuff, and it doesn't cost us so much to make it. It helped us survive. Without consolidation, we would have folded. You know, and one could argue about whether they're telling the truth or not. They will argue that they pick up additive advantages by consolidation across, especially across industries. Okay. What that essentially means is, though, they get to lay people off. They get leaner, thinner organizations that are more efficient. Right? So the profit potentially goes up. We don't know about the quality of the material, but they claim that that makes their companies more stable and that they can share the information across the enterprises. It's hard to know exactly what the outcome of that is, but that's the claim. Then, on the other side, we know that competition is good, both with regard to honesty and innovation. It also, the bigger these companies get, the harder it gets now this is an interesting paradox. Sorry. I don't have this listed as one, but it is. New media is supposed to be personalized, right? As opposed to mass media. So you're supposed to have more personal interaction with the medium. Okay. But this is going on at the same time as consolidation. And companies getting bigger. So, who do you call? And I don't want to I don't want to oversimplify this, because if you make it too old, then it gets just too simple. But you used to pick up the phone, call your local newspaper, and they owned the damn thing. You pick up the phone, you call your local radio station, there was a disc jockey there. You know, with whether it was cards or record, but there was a person there. Call that radio station now, and there's nobody operating the thing. It's syndicated. So there's an operator who brings in stuff, but they're from all over the place. There's nobody there. Okay, in most places, the local newspaper still has at least some impact on what happens. But still, the big decisions get made from someplace else. So as we've seen this new media, which is supposed to be more personalized, consolidation of the industries has made it less. It's harder to contact these people. Okay? They're more insulated. The bigger they get, the more insulated they get. The harder it is to have sort of contact with them. So it's not exactly clear. It's troublesome.